ever existed in this multiverse, and that will ever exist in this multiverse. Think of any life that you think was well lived. Think of Dr. King. Think of Mother Teresa. Think of Gandhi. Think of any other powerful life. Think of Hitler. Think of Osama bin Laden. Any life that had had a profound impact on our reality, we have all of that power within us, even as we are so unimportant in the landscape. Not unimportant, seemingly insignificant in the landscape of the cosmos. So a fly was the messenger that taught me that. And all I can say about that is it makes me incredibly eager to find out if a fly could teach me that. Then what will I teach this world? What will we teach this world? What will we bring to this world? What message will we leave this world with if we are able to drop our reluctance and to drop our resistance and allow ourselves to be the angels that we might be? Thank you for your practice. One more time for Kelsey Hoffer.
So, it all started about 6 weeks ago because the person in this portrait who is hidden lives in South Africa. She is a biologist and she's working with a species of cranes there to save them from the brink of extinction. So she had stuff to do and couldn't be here tonight. So I reached out to our own community and I found someone who was willing to come and speak on her behalf. And Asia Summers is, like most of the people here, doing what she loves the most to do. She inspires people for a living. She also has the job most of us wish we had. She works at the zoo. She is coming to us from travels to many different zoos and aquariums around the country, and she chose to work in Racine because she felt they needed her more here. Her job at the zoo is education programs manager, which means she goes into the schools and works with the kids and brings animals to them and teaches them the importance of the animals and of preservation of them in the wild. She says her favorite part of the zoo is her favorite part of the job is when she's able to connect those people with the animals and get them to appreciate them and love them the way she does. And she has been so kind and gracious to join us really kind of last minute tonight, and I hope you'll give a really warm welcome to Asia Summers. top of the stick. A little shorter here, there we go. So, as Deb said, this portrait is not of me. This
That could be her, you don't know.
I have worn the costume. It is as warm as it looks. And I have done this myself, but this is not me. This is Ann Burke. And I do absolutely want to give her credit because she is one of the people that developed this technique that we're going to talk about. But as Deb said, my job is not an artist. I am a scientist, I am a teacher, and most of all, I'm a storyteller. So today I want to tell you guys some stories that have to do not with Anne in this picture, but with the first thing I see when I look at this picture, which is this gorgeous baby wattled crane chick. Cranes, to me, are one of the most beautiful animals in the world. When I was a kid, spring wasn't blooming flowers, spring wasn't warming temperatures. Spring was when the sandhill cranes would migrate through and I would hear them bugling in my backyard again. And I was lucky that spring meant that to me. When Aldo Leopold, the creator of the idea of a holistic view of conservation, of looking at everything in nature, wrote his seminal work, A Sand County Almanac, where he called sandhill cranes, no mere bird, the trumpet in the orchestra of evolution. There were only 100 sandhill cranes left in the state of Wisconsin. And thanks to Anne, thanks to the Crane Foundation, thanks to the work of generations of conservationists, today there are hundreds of thousands of cranes here in amazing conservationists that have come before me. And I've been lucky enough to watch their populations grow, even in my lifetime. And it was by far the greatest honor of my career when I was allowed to work for a season at the International Crane Foundation alongside these amazing conservation greats that pioneered these amazing techniques. So what we see here is called costume rearing. It is the result of many, many failures. It's actually the first project I ever did at the Crane Foundation was on failure, because that's what most of conservation is. They were trying to rear sandhill crane chicks, and they didn't know what to do in the wild. They didn't know who to mate with. They weren't imprinting on the right species. So the amazing people, Anne, as well as some others, George Archibald, Ron Sowie, they decided they would dress up like a crane and try to convince babies that they were adult cranes. And everyone said they were absolutely crazy, but lo and behold, it worked. And that's why Anne is not here today. She's in South Africa teaching them the techniques that they use to bring whooping cranes here in North America back from the brink of extinction. Whooping cranes were gone from Wisconsin when Anne started her work, and today there's 100 of them in the wild. So if you look at the sandhill cranes and how far they've come, who knows what might come for whooping cranes and wattled cranes in South Africa as well. This technique that Anne depicted here really captures people's imagination. Cranes, as it is, are such a charismatic animal, and as someone that tries to connect people to animals, they are by far the easiest ones to talk about. When I stand with a Madagascar hissing cockroach, it is very difficult for me to win over an audience. But when I stand in front of a crane, they have that built-in majesty, that grace, that elegance that everybody loves. So this idea of dressing up as a crane and working with these animals already catches people's attention, as I'm sure it did Deb when she was inspired to create this work. And what I love about this piece is that in the foreground, in the background, you see this connection between humans and nature. They're one and the same. And as a conservationist, as someone who talks to people who aren't of the same mindset as me every single day, I always hear people talk about this fight between humans and nature, this duality that they believe exists. And that's not what conservation is about. Conservation is not about saving species at the cost of people. It's about saving both. And I want to share a couple stories from the International Crane Foundation, from the work that I was so lucky to be a part of, and what they're doing. I think my favorite story is of the demilitarized zone between the Koreas. Everyone knows the relationship between North and South Korea. They are not friends. Those are not two countries that you would think would sit down and talk about anything. They are such opposites that they did what 3-year-olds do in their bedroom and drew a giant line in between the two of them and said no one can cross. This line spans 160 miles,
And this line is 2.5 miles long. No people are supposed to go in there. It's not very safe to go in there. But this line is 400 miles of amazing habitat, some of the last temperate forest left untouched in Southeast Asia. So what the Crane Foundation has done, and what the leaders of this organization have done, is go into North Korea. And because cranes are a symbol of peace in the Koreas, leaders from North and South Korea sat down with the International Crane Foundation to discuss the preservation of this space. That doesn't just benefit the cranes. That benefits the hundreds of mammal species, the thousands of invertebrate species, all of the species that live in this area. And it helps the people that live alongside them as well. It helps bridge the gap between these two groups of people. In Vietnam, in Phu My, a wonderful little wetland, there lives the Saurus crane. The Saurus crane is the tallest flying bird in the world. They can stand over 7 feet tall, and if you've ever stood face to face with one, they're a little terrifying. These birds were disappearing because people needed to feed their children. Most of the time when you see conservation problems, when you see species disappearing, people don't hate the birds. This is the same area where a friend of mine, Jim Harris, went and saw a farmer plowing a field carefully leave the plants where a crane was nesting and work around them in his rice paddy. People cared about the birds, but as the same choice any of us would make, they were destroying the wetlands to raise crops to feed their families. And no one can fault them for that. What the Crane Foundation did is they wanted to find a way to not just be that person that comes in and says, no, you can't feed your children, we have to save those birds. That's not going to work. No one is going to do anything. And they discovered, just going, meeting the people, talking to the people, that the women in this village were weaving these amazing baskets out of the leperonia grass that grew in the wetlands. And they realized that these baskets were gorgeous. This is where the answer was. So they took these baskets, they told the women, these are amazing, we should do more of this, we're going to sell these. And they did, and incomes of the local people went up tenfold. Suddenly the wetland wasn't something in the way of feeding their children, suddenly it was something that they could use to feed their children. They could improve their lives. It definitely improved the balance between men and women in the community, and saved the cranes at the same time. In South Africa, people were trying to feed their families with their livestock. And unfortunately, a lot of predators live in that area as well. They'd come in, they'd kill the livestock. No one can feed their family. So they were putting out poison bait for things like lions, things like hyenas that lived in the area. Now the blue crane, another critically endangered species, lived in this area and would also feed on those bait, the poison bait, and pass away. This is why the Crane Foundation came in and said, okay, what can we do? There, the answer was as simple as guard dogs. Guard dogs given to these people protect their livestock. A lot of people say, well, a guard dog versus a lion. But if you're the lion and you're looking at it, there's a guard dog there, and there's some zebra without a guard dog. Dinner's easy. You're going to go for the zebra. Little tiny changes, learning what the challenges the people are facing, and helping the people is helping the cranes again. In the Zambezi River Delta, in Zambia, there was a dam that they wanted to build because local people needed electricity. We all like electricity, we can't blame anyone for that. And building this dam was drying the wetlands up that the wattled cranes, the species here, needed to survive. That's a hard challenge. They thought it was the people or the cranes, and the people were winning out. Until Rich Belfast of the International Crane Foundation came in with this great idea, why don't we open the dam now and then? Keep it there, run it, get the electricity, but he studied the natural flood cycles, and every now and then would open the gates and flood the plains just like nature would do. And suddenly, the cranes still had their wetlands, and the people could still have their electricity. Cranes are these amazing animals that spark so many people to get involved in conservation. They get people excited, they get people interested. And what people like Anne, people like myself, people like the Crane Foundation do is they harness that excitement to not only help the cranes, but to help the people who live alongside them. All of us that are conservationists, all of this that people say we fight against nature every day. We're not fighting against nature. These people, like myself, like Anne, like people from around the world, Like Olivier, a friend of mine from Rwanda, who got into cranes because it was something that he could educate children on so they would want to get an education. People like Iterbach, who was looking for a way to feed his children in Mongolia, who stumbled into working with cranes and became a world-renowned researcher. These wonderful people I've met. People like some of the speakers today that I've met, who work to be sustainable. People who write about nature. Naturalists, zookeepers, sustainable artists. We're not fighting against nature. We're fighting with nature for humans. And that's what Anne here is doing, and that's what I try to do every single day. Thank you.
So you've all had that one teacher, right? And I've actually been really fortunate to have a few of them. But this all started 32 years ago when Paul was my professor of British literature in college. And since I was minoring in British literature, I had him almost every semester for some class or another. And he was a tough professor, and his exams were tough. You had to know your stuff inside and out. So exams were stressful. One time, I walked into a final exam in a Shakespeare class, and it was pretty quiet, and everyone was pretty tense. And Paul walked in, and he stared us down, and he said, "There's strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold, and the Arctic trails have witnessed tales that could make your blood run cold," which Shakespeare did not write. And he went on and recited the entire poem, which is called The Cremation of Sam McGee, which clearly I still remember, along with my Shakespeare, but it made us laugh and it cut the tension a bit, and we got on with our work. Paul moved away for my senior year. He was not there. He left after my junior year and went back to California on the West Coast and his mountains. But he has stayed ever since and has been a very celebrated poet, writer, and teacher. He is the former poet laureate of Santa Barbara, and his work has been included in an anthology series called The Best American Poetry. He is an environmentalist, which is why he's pictured here, almost hidden in the wilds. And he's come to talk to us tonight all the way from California, and for the first time, my seeing him in about 30 years. So please welcome Dr. Paul Willis.
Thank you, Deb. Are you sure that wasn't the Ballad of Blasphemous Bill? I think that's the one I have by heart. My memories of Deb as a college student, she was very earnest, very sincere, very eager. And my sense of her was that it was someone that wanted to do something good in the world, and I think she's doing it right now. So, thank you, Deb. I want to share a little bit of my path with you, just as Thea did.